I'm Eric Green, partner at Green and Sklar's, a boutique tax law firm and founder of the tax resolution training organization, Tax Rep LLC. Welcome to another edition of Tax Rep Network podcast. I want to thank our sponsors, Tax Help Software and Call ENQ. We've only taken podcast sponsors of products that we actually use at Green and Sklar's. Call ENQ is what allows us to call the government and get into the IRS in under 3 minutes. Tax Help Software is what we use to pull transcripts. It's our intelligent ordering where we track what's going on with our clients overnight. So in the morning, we know of anything that's happened on the IRS side, and also what we use for our resolution forms, our offers, installment agreements, uncollectible powers of attorney, all of that. Our sponsors have special offers for you. If you want to check them out, go to taxrepllc.com, resources, and TRN podcast page to view the sponsor offers. Enjoy the episode. All right, everyone. Welcome to what is our 100th episode of the Tax Rep Network, which
that is a moment to celebrate.
It's a little mind-blowing, and so I love the topic that we're going to cover, and you know, the growth of Tax Rep never ceases to amaze me. You know, when the thing started, it was like 12 of us, right? I had like 12 coaching clients, and the podcast was mostly but mostly bitching about whatever I wanted to talk about, whatever was and if you go back and look at the earlier episodes, you'll tell that, like what to do in the auditors, batshit crazy, and open your freaking mail and all these things. Something triggered. They were like triggering things, and then I'm going to do a podcast, and I just I'd rant.
It can be therapeutic.
Well, it was, but here's what's frightening. So now it's probably 2 years ago. I'm going to interview Paul Mamo, who's the was the director of collections for the IRS for NYU. We do these sort of scripted interviews at the beginning of a lot of the big conferences, and Paul and I went through it, over the phone. We were doing it the next morning at NYU, and he said, "Well, after we do it at NYU, why don't we do this again and do it on your podcast?" And I'm like, "You listen to the podcast?" And he said, "Actually, a bunch of us at the IRS listened to it." He said, "It's good to hear what you think unfiltered." So I called Jeff Sklar's, my law partner, and he was like, "All right, well, note to self, don't say any shit in the podcast. You don't want the IRS." And what I didn't realize is I have most of CI listening to me and following me on Facebook. The Christina O'Connell, who was the special agent in charge of the Boston field office, has been on a couple times, and she said, "Oh no, I love your Facebook feed and the stuff that you're posting." And I didn't realize she was following me.
Right.
And so again, note to self, I got to be real careful about what I go. First of all, everyone should be careful what they start posting online. In fact, frankly, I think if Facebook went away tomorrow, it would be a good thing. But no, I'm a little amazed that it's like 400 Tax Rep members, and if it's the 100th episode, we're getting, I think it's like 6,400 downloads a month. We just passed, I think we're closing in on 200,000 downloads. That's
awesome.
It's a little crazy. I gotta be honest, it's a little nuts. But for today's, how to do what you love. One thing I noticed that I hear from many listeners who email me, and they're saying it in a variety of different ways, but it's sort of the same thing, which is how can they make a change? How can they make that shift from whatever it is they're doing, whatever bullshit job that they're clearly not enjoying, to something more meaningful? And how do you take your interest or passion project and make it your career? Because I've talked about that. I started off doing corporate tax. And right. I would slip my wrists if I had to go back to doing that today. It just wasn't my personality. And I kind of found my way. And we'll get into that a little bit later. I've done this, Amy, you've done this. And I get it now so frequently. And honestly, I think the last 2 seasons, tax seasons, the coronavirus pandemic has driven home to a lot of people, I'm not getting the joy out of this.
Right.
This is really becoming a grind. So I mentioned all of this, and my assistant Nicole, when I broached, talking about this, she's like, "Look, we have psychiatrists and psychologists as clients. We have coaches as clients. I said, no. I got to get Amy Vetter. And, and she was like, is she a doctor? And I'm like, no, but I need Amy Vetter.
Well, it's such an honor. Thank you.
Well, no. And in fact, for the people listening, I called Amy to talk about doing this and used it as a whole session for myself. And so finally, when Amy was like, "All right, look, we can move on now," and I'll do the podcast. So Amy is with me. So for those of you who don't know Amy because you've been living somewhere else, whatever, Amy Vetter is an accomplished entrepreneur, business executive, national speaker, CPA, yoga practitioner, technologist. She's a third-generation woman entrepreneur who's launched and sold multiple businesses, including owning and operating her own yoga studios, accounting practice, and other business ventures. Amy and I actually met at the CCH Users Conference in Miami. Miami or Boca? I think it was Miami. And Hector was there. And I remember I was trying to arrange dinner with Hector, and somebody told me that you and I had to meet.
Mariette, yeah.
Yeah, oh, that's right. It was Mariette. Yeah. I've had Mariette on, actually. Mariette was on a bunch of episodes ago. And so I remember just like asking you to dinner, which is such a weird, I mean, Hector and I are going, so I want to make sure it wasn't like, I wasn't hitting on you, but Hector and I are going to do dinner, and we ended up going to, it was an Asian fusion place, I think. And then I remember Hector and I went out onto the beach. We're like, we'll have cigars. It was like 50-mile-an-hour winds. Like we weren't having cigars. But again, I don't want to spend a ton of time because you've put a lot of stuff out there. But again, for those of you not familiar with Amy learned as a child that what hard work was when she was forced to work 3 jobs to help her family financially. Made sense she would become a CPA and ultimately make partner. You end up having some health issues and decide to make a change, which is, most people live to make partner. At the firm, people want to make partner. CPA firms want to make partner, like it's the top of Mount Everest.
Yeah.
And you get there and all of a sudden you're like, I don't want this. I've got to make a change. And so that's what I want to get into today, because I think there are a lot of people, and I say a lot, I probably have 40 emails over the last 4 months, but the message, the question is consistent. And so first of all, Amy, thank you for coming back again. Thank you for being on my 100th episode.
It's so exciting.
I don't know about that, but thank you. And so you and I have both made these changes, you out of a partnership in an accounting firm to professional speaker, yogi, technologist, rock musician, by the way, everybody.
Hobby.
Well,
I'm not a professional musician by any means, but I love it.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Me, from a corporate tax attorney to a controversy lawyer, speaker, and coach. Both changes are dramatic. I think yours certainly more so. You've discussed health issues, but even beyond health issues, that's a big mind shift. To say, I've worked my way to get here, and I'm prepared to give that up. And so, and it's not completely give it up. I mean, you do, that's how we met. You do still live in this world.
Absolutely.
But in a much different role. If you don't mind, can you sort of describe a little bit of what was going on, but how did you get there?
Yeah. And I do want to caveat, it took a long time. So, and what it really was about was observing myself and not rushing into anything. So I think everyone hits those crossroads. That's why you're getting those emails. That's why I get the clients I have and speaking at the conferences I do, because, happiness is hard to come by. That's not necessary. You have to, I think, work for happiness. It's not something that just happens to you. And, and I'll, give you my personal story is, I really became a CPA. I I was going to be a CPA at 12 years old. How would I even know what a CPA is unless someone's putting that in my head? So
Right.
my grandfather was a CPA.
Yep.
And had a practice from the 1930s. He died when I was 3, I believe. So, but I do remember him, and he definitely has been, I would say, this guiding light in my life, even though I didn't know him, only because he was important to my mother, who made the decision to go in the opposite direction and not become a CPA and became an art teacher. So from the time I was very little, and I think with her father dying, she felt guilty that she had not become a CPA and really started putting the pressure on that this was going.
Yeah. It's now your problem.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't know different, right? Like, and I do want to say, like, the advice wasn't bad. I think, the difference I would say is, had natural tendencies in the creative fields. I played violin and viola growing up. I painted, actually had a scholarship to go to art school, leaving high school. And because my mom had gone the art route, her thing to me was, that's not a safe career. Accounting is, which is true. But I do believe in, and in the pivots that I've made, staying in the accounting profession and feeling very strong about it. But the pivots I've made over time, realizing that if you're passionate about something, you will be successful. It's how you get there. It's what you have to figure out, but there's not necessarily a roadmap to it. And, when I became partner, I actually was going to a therapist at the time because I was feeling off. And that day I was like, why am I not happy? Like, I thought, like, this is what was it. Like you said, the pinnacle, you made it to the top of the mountain. And I realized that I was living someone else's dream and not my own. But having said that, we all build experience in an area, right? Like, so I had thousands and thousands of hours of experience in that. And the part about being an accountant that I was very passionate about was helping small businesses. It was always important to me because my mom had been an entrepreneur, my grandmother had been an entrepreneur, my grandfather had a CPA firm. So I lived in that world. So I felt my purpose being an accountant was to help small business owners. So it wasn't like I wanted to give it up, but I did have to pause. And so I think, when you hit those moments, it's not about moving too quickly. It's then starting to have delight in the research. You're researching yourself.
Right.
And not trying to come up with a decision right away, but being open to the opportunities that are coming to you, and maybe just saying yes instead of no, and not putting up barriers and saying, oh, I don't have experience in that, or I've never done that before. It's like, well, how do you know you don't like it? This, just because this was your plan doesn't mean like there's not other things you might like. And what I found in the journey, which we can get more into, but this pivot happened for years, but it was about me saying yes to opportunities and then saying, how can I use my experience and keep melding myself into things that got to the root of my soul, of what made me happy. And, that without the experience of having the accounting experience in a traditional way, I couldn't do what I'm doing today because I could never advise and consult people if I hadn't been there. So none of it's bad. It's right. Just where you want to go, and realize that your life kind of happens in chunks, and then there's transitions.
What's interesting is, and I'd been told this before, but it never came home to me. So for me, I was an accounting major, went to go into accounting. I hated accounting. I could do it. I understand debits, credits, and all that, but the actual day-to-day of it, I didn't like. And so I end up going to law school. From law school, naturally, I go into the Big Four. And so I'm at several the Big Four accounting firms. And for me, it was the layoff. So 2002 comes, and I, in fairly quick succession, get laid off from two different firms.
Yeah.
Because in 2002, the world's employers seemed sort of intent on shrinking. And I was staff. I was one of those victims. And what was interesting is, and it came home to me the second time it happened. My wife and I were about to put in a bid on our first home. So we'd seen it, we loved it, we knew the people that were selling. They were sort of friends, kind of. And so I twice had to call my wife from the office that I had been laid off and was coming home. The second time to tell her we can't put in the bid. I'm
Right.
unemployed, which sucked, by the way. What I found, and what I would suggest to the people who are listening, and this is what I had been told, but it never really struck me until then. People think I'm going to go get a job. It's safe, right? It's security. I can assure you, being at big firms and not being fired because, Eric, you did this, you have to go.
Right.
It is, we don't need you anymore.
Right.
It's the illusion of security. You actually don't. In fact, I would now suggest you have less security. I mean, here, the partners that bring in money, we could get into a disagreement. This isn't the case. I could end up hating them. They're not going anywhere.
Right.
They can walk out the door, take their business with them. If my partners all showed up right now and said, get out, I'd be like, okay, right. Grab my humidor and my wife's picture and whatever, and keep the Yeti.
Wait,
mug.
wrong order.
Yeah. I'm thinking I'm going
Your
in order of the way I would.
Picture first, and then the humidor.
I was making the round, so going in order, it would be, yeah, whatever. Anyway, you're right. Of course, my wife's picture, then the 600 cigar humidor. They can keep the bourbon anyway, and off I'm going. Right. And tomorrow I'd find an office. I'd email my clients, and on Monday morning I would be open for business. Right. I mean, it would suck. I'd be hurt, because I'm friends with my partners, but
yeah,
it wouldn't be life ending. The staff, the associates might find it so, because they may suddenly find they don't have a job. And so it really is the illusion. And so I think when people think about that, going and starting their own thing, and I want to get back to your point, because it doesn't have to be by choice. It doesn't have to be I'm quitting and doing tomorrow, starting from zero. There's a way to do this smartly, where you can get yourself that window of opportunity to make that leap. But
or you find that, you know what, actually, I do like what I do.
Yeah.
Like when you give yourself pause and you do the research and kind of exploring other things, and maybe exploring yourself, being really honest with yourself, and getting, everyone needs those outside coaches and independent people to talk to. And when you really get into it, it might be something completely different that's causing the turmoil inside of you, not necessarily what you think. It's kind of the BandAid that you have to pull off to have the courage to go there. And that's the hard part of just sitting in the muck, being uncomfortable, and allowing yourself to observe what's going on for you. And so maybe it's changing, or maybe it's like, you know what, I really do appreciate what I have.
It could be the place you're doing it, but it also could be the way that you're doing it.
Right.
One of the things, and I'm just thinking of now, I had Joe Woodard on the program probably over a year ago now, and we were talking about how Intuit had rolled out automated bookkeeping with artificial intelligence. It would do the bookkeeping for you. And he said, people are freaking out. Like pro advisors, oh my God, Intuit's going to put me out of business. And my offhand comment was like, well, but wait a minute. If I were a bookkeeper and now I can do this, my whole job is I'm freed up. Go get more clients. And he said, that's the switch. There are going to be a bunch of people who are going to be dinosaurs. They will be out of business. They're going to be gone. But the people that realize that they can now either A, shrink their overhead because they can get it done cheaper, or with the same footprint, do more. So my point is, the change doesn't have to be radical. I mean, for me, it was, I don't like doing corporate tax. I do enjoy tax. I kind of liked helping those handful of people I had that had tax problems. Maybe I can do more of that. Right. And when you start doing the research, you realize there aren't too many people that do what I do. Mm-hmm. In fact, I hooked up with maybe one of only 2 firms in the state that did it. These 2 older IRS trial attorneys who were like, look, we'll give you a desk. We'll probably give you some work that we don't want to do. Otherwise, it's on you. And it's amazing how much you learn to market and network when you're watching your life savings, dwindling away. Mm-hmm. And so in 6 months, I had replaced what I had been making at the firm. A year on, I was making more. I think another year after that, I had to hire help. And it's been, there were 23 people now. Mm-hmm. It's sort of, I've never looked back. In fact, the thought of going back to work for one of those firms, it'd be no mm-hmm. way. But it feels, I think, to people who are used to a paycheck, it feels like a dangerous path. It feels like the more dangerous course, because you feel like you don't have the safety net, right? You go to an office and you have a paycheck. My feeling is that all of that is an illusion. You think it's there, but I've found out there are days when it's not going to be there anymore.
Yeah, I definitely get that point, but I would say, I think people are born to be an entrepreneur or not. There is a risk level you have to be comfortable with as an entrepreneur. And not everyone wants to lead in that kind of way. We're, all not made that way. So a shift can be getting another job or doing something different or taking what you do somewhere else. Or it's a shift right where you work to say, something that you're seeing as far as AI or machine learning or blockchain is really of interest to you, and you want to start dual rolling that until it becomes its own job. There's so many people I've interviewed on my podcast that there was nothing called a chief mindfulness officer before, and then they just kind of over time created something that then became a job, so because as an entrepreneur and having so many jobs, like, I know that I love the thrill of being an entrepreneur. There's something, sometimes I will even compare it to it's gambling at times, because it's like maybe that big deal is going to come in the next day, or you start seeing, all the ideas that you put in place, they're working, but sometimes they don't work, or things like COVID happens and there is no paycheck, when things go down. And, so you have to have a risk tolerance. And I usually tell people, if they're going to do it, like, what's your exit? So I think I talked to you about this, last week when we were talking, is, or maybe it was somebody else, maybe it wasn't you. But when we teach a handstand in yoga, when we teach people to go upside down the first time, we teach them to understand what their exit's going to be before they go up, so that you don't fall. So, how are you going to get out of that inversion, before you fall, so you don't hurt yourself? And so there's safe ways to get out of a handstand or a headstand before you fall. And I compare that to business, is that you have to have some thoughts in your head of how you're going to protect yourself financially. What are your other game plans? What you have to do a business plan. You have to have priorities in place, and then where you're going to shift. And there is for me, at least, being a business owner, there's always the pressure of what am I going to do next to stay fresh, to stay ahead, to keep it going. So, there's a certain personality type that's really good at that. Like I know in a number of my businesses, my right-hand person will be completely opposite from me because they're the ones that can execute all my ideas that I keep throwing at them. Right. And I had one time with my yoga studio, we went to this yoga workshop and then my head was like full of ideas of what we could bring back to the studio. So we go to dinner that night with my studio manager and I'm like, I totally know how we can put this in place and blah, blah, blah. And she paused with me and was like, Amy, I know you see it. I can't see it yet. Give me till Monday.
Yeah.
They trust me enough to know that it will, like what I'm seeing is probably going to be the right thing.
Right.
But like, that's not the way she thinks, nor can she take too much of it. Like she, and I can appreciate I've got to pair back with people that work for me so that they can execute and do well and feel like they're doing good in their job too. Cause sometimes I might want to go faster than they can. So I think it's all a balance. And when you're going through this process of observation, it's to get really clear on like, if you test a side hustle, are you comfortable in that? And that you may not make as much money as you may, like you have got a great story, but that's not true of every business, and I've kind of had a mindset of how much do I need to make, not how much could I make, so that at least I know I could achieve that. And if I can achieve that, everything in excess is awesome, right? And it allows me to do new things. But I have to get comfortable with what's my bottom line to know that this is safe for myself and my family.
Well, yeah. I mean, a couple of things. I actually think you can learn to be an entrepreneur. I wasn't. I mean, if you think about it,
You sold T-shirts in college.
I did. but
You're
I also
always thinking that way.
But well, the truth is honestly, if I were honest with you and everyone else, I'm lazy.
Yeah.
Left to my own devices, I would be happy to hang around, just lay around. I actually think anyone can be an entrepreneur. Some people just get more motivated when they get laid off than others. Yeah. But it doesn't have to be and as you've laid out, it doesn't have to be a jarring experience. So first of all, and you mentioned this, go and try living in it for a little while. So for instance, if you're somebody who wants to really go and do charitable work for your synagogue or your church, take a day or two out and go do that. Go see what that feels like. Do you like that? Is that what you want to do? Your side hustle, you might find you really don't like. All right. Like for instance, a lot of my members still have 1040 practices. They're building this. You can give yourself a window. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And what I think people will find is, I think there's a whole different problem. I think what people will find is you keep doing it. And what will happen is you'll get to the point where you cannot do both. And now you have an interesting decision, but you can make a decision knowing, as Amy laid out, and only I need, let's say it's I need $80,000 a year to keep my household going. All right. And it may be tough, right? Because now you're really busy doing two things, but you make sure you get to a point. So when you do cut the other one loose, it isn't you've
all or nothing.
You got laid off and now you're bottomed out. I think the real problem is, as an entrepreneur, you have to be disciplined.
Yeah.
You have to be able, there are only two questions that matter. Where do you want to go? And what price are you willing to pay? So when I say anyone can be an entrepreneur, anyone can do what I do. Are you willing to, I probably have 20,000 hours in the development of Tax Rep and all the coaching and all of the materials. It was years and years of nights and weekends and working on it. Do you have the discipline to do that? In fact, what's interesting is I get emails from people, and you can tell as I'm getting older, I'm getting crankier. because it used to be, people say, Eric, I'd love to do this. I just don't have the time. I'm too busy. And I say, well, look, I think you can carve out whatever. The last poor person, the guy who emailed me said, I really love to do this. I just don't have the time. And I literally emailed back saying, I think it was 3 sentences. Basically, shut off the TV, shut your fucking phone off. Everyone has time. If you want it.
Right.
So here's my being, not meaning to be unduly harsh, but to be blunt. Where do you want to go? What do you want? I mean, Brent Robertson was on from Fathom, and when I was really struggling a couple of years ago, he said to me, "What do you want?" And I was like, "Well, what do you mean? He's like, No. Tell me what you want. Describe for me what you want. Describe your day, your week, your month, your year." Mm-hmm. He said, because your brain is like, and I think Tony Robbins actually did a whole thing on this. I caught pieces of. It's a servo mechanism. It's like those smart bombs. Without knowing what to go for, to just work for the sake of working doesn't mean anything. But once you know what you want, your brain will figure out a way to get there. You just need the discipline to execute it. What do you want, and what price are you willing to pay? For instance, for those listening, I have no shows. I've never seen Breaking Bad. I've never seen Better Call Saul. I mean, I hear about them. People talk about them. I don't watch TV. Every now and then I'll watch a football game. In fact, funny story, our universal remote broke, and it was 2 months. Finally, my son said, "Are you going to get a new one?" I didn't know it was broken. I don't watch TV. Mm-hmm. I'm never in there. He can use an app on his phone, but to me, so for me, I would rather spend the time working on Tax Rep and the podcast and those things than, so for people that go home, I'm going to suggest you have the time. What really comes through is, do you want this? How bad do you want it? Do you want to learn to speak like Amy Vetter? If so, you're not going to be at AICPA on the main stage, but you could probably do a talk at your local NATP or NAEA or whatever group it is. Spend the time, put together a talk on a topic. You can do it, and you do it again and again. Then you find groups that'll pay you, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute. Yeah, it's funny when I mentioned this, Caroline Cirolo, who's a brilliant speaker, and Caroline looked at me. She's like, "You get paid for this? How?" And I was like, "There are people that will pay me." And she's like, "Who are they?" And so she started speaking and getting paid. I think it's really a matter of whatever you want to do. Just again, what do you want? Okay, I want this. I'm like, people can't see me. Like, I'm pointing up at something. Okay, now what do I need to do to get there? You break down the steps. Now you have a plan. Now it's a matter of executing on the plan. I want to own my own shop. I want to get so many bookkeeping clients. How am I going to do it? Well, I can get into automated bookkeeping, and I can do that. And you begin laying out, and then you work at it. No one does this overnight. I know people might think that there are overnight, like people just make it overnight, except for the first 10 years that everything else was failing. It comes down to, unfortunately, it's a grind. You got to grind. You got to look at it, but you don't want to grind without knowing where you're grinding to, right? I think you need to have a specific goal of what do you want, and once you figure out what you want, and be honest with yourself, what do you really want? And then the next thing is, you know what your bare minimum is. But if I'm going to fall short, it's not of my bare minimum. All right. I'm going to 10x that thing. All right. So I don't want 100 members. I want 1,000 members. And that's what I'm going to shoot for. I want to have 2,000 podcast episodes. I want to, go from bringing in $1 million to my firm to $2.5 million or $5 million or whatever it is. And you set big goals and you go after them. Yeah. You may fall short. So what? Just, go for it. Now, Amy, you have talked about, again, and I have the book, I read the book, the B3 method, with the idea of business and that you can be balanced, right? Business plus balance equals bliss, or if you'll let me change it, fulfillment. All right, what is fulfilling to people that you can do this, and you have the B3 Institute where you actually help people do this. Um, can you describe sort of the professionals that do come to you? I'm curious, do they have a particular type of problem, or do you find people are all over the place? What does that look like when people come to you?
Well, I think, there's some things you addressed and maybe some things we go about a little bit differently, but, um, I'm very much, to your point, into building a plan. Um, if you don't have a foundation to your career, life, business, there's no house that you can build. So a lot of people will start businesses where they're in an accounting firm, starting advisory services as a business line, and they are lost in how to make money because they're trying to operate the way they've always done it or take every client that comes in the door. And it's not necessarily priced right. It's not necessarily thought through that you're living your passion and your purpose. And so, what the B3 Method Institute is about is understanding what your passion, what is your why do you do what you do every day? Why do you wake up? Why does it excite you? What kind of outcome do you want to create for others? What's your personal purpose? And so a lot of times we focus more on the business goals versus what our individual personal purpose is each day. And so whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you are someone in your career, it's important to kind of step back and define what that is so that when you're putting together your business goals, when you're putting together your career goals, you're aligning it to your values and making sure that it's going to create happiness. So for me, the definition of bliss is sustained happiness or the maintenance of happiness. The maintenance of happiness is up to us, and it may look different to each person. So for instance, maybe someone wants quality of life, like they want to work less, not more, not, it's not about the number of clients they can get. It's about having quality of life and a better balance between work and your personal life. And, if watching TV works for you, that's fine. But to your point, if you're going to use the excuse of not moving forward, that's a different excuse, right? Like understanding of the things that you enjoy to kind of decompress, that lets your mind or brain kind of relax, is really important to understand, and that you're making time for that. Because when you make time for those activities, sometimes we actually come up with our best ideas because we actually released our brain from the work environment. There's so many times I've been out running or, doing something completely, sitting on a plane, and all of a sudden I'm solving a problem that I couldn't solve during the workday. And that's because our brain needs those moments. It needs those moments to take those breaks. So not only do we talk about, how to put the foundation in place and build a roadmap for your business that aligns with your passion and your purpose, but also how to balance your life and make sure that you are doing the things for yourself that are so important in order to create the energy that you want for the people around you. And you're not just blaming the outside world for how you feel. You're contributing to the energy in the world and making sure that you're creating positive experience as well.
Well, the other thing, and you hinted at this too, happiness is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It doesn't happen to you. You choose to be happy. Now, there's sometimes there are some things that happen that it makes it impossible to choose to be happy. Um, but you're right. And I think the key thing, and I was going to ask this: what kind of transformation can people make? I mean, um, I mean, on the surface, yours is fairly dramatic, but like as you've already said, not really. You still do live in this world. You're just not in the same role you were before as a partner in a CPA firm, but you still address CPAs, and you needed that experience to do what you do. People that are looking to make a change, it doesn't. I mean, it can be radical, but it doesn't have to be. It could be within the world where they're already
Which is
dwelling.
what you do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still a tax lawyer. Um, I still speak, but instead of now just trying to get clients, I'm actually speaking to help other people who, in my field. Um, so what kind of transformation do you see people make, the folks that come to you?
Well, I think it's the biggest thing starts with getting to know what's important to you. And that's where to begin is your purpose in life, and I've done an exercise many times with people that I give a talk about it, of just these 4 pillars in our life, to make sure we're balanced between joy and finance and family, friends, and financial or like brand, of what we're putting out in the world. Because if we are too focused on any one area, then we get off balance and feel like we're failing in another area. And we don't often just take time to review where we're off balance in our life, and be intentional about what little shifts we can make each month in order to be in better balance. And then take a review, just like a manager would review you review yourself of how well did I do and what I wanted to achieve in these areas personally, my career, my personal life, my activities, and the energy I'm creating around me. And so when we have that foundation in place, then we can look at our business goals and say, are we living to our values and our purpose? And if we're not, that's when we start getting stressed. That's when our body starts hurting. So we have a rational mind and an intuitive mind. And our rational mind will say, no, we need to do this. No, we need to do that. And that's kind of the example of, keep pushing in my career to a CPA firm partner, because that's what I thought was happiness, because I was told that was happiness. And I saw with other people that made them happy. So I thought that's what I wanted, versus looking at myself and saying, what would actually make sure I'm happy? And if my work or something personally is out of alignment, I'm going to start being off kilter. I'm going to stop being happy. And then what do I need to do in my career or personal life to start making these little shifts? And so it's an important, it might sound fluffy, to a lot of people, but it is a key thing in maintaining your own happiness, is being aware that just that sense of awareness when you're off. So I think for me, the biggest thing I achieved myself was awareness. It wasn't some pinnacle in any business that I do. It's that awareness when I start feeling off internally, and I can recognize that feeling and pause and stop and go, why am I having this feeling right now? What do I need to change? And some of it might be to let go of some things. Some of it might be, I'm not doing what I had planned to do in my business, and I need to shift back to my original goals. I mean, when we talked about earlier about running a business, the other problem I see with business owners, because it's hard, is you get so many different opportunities come at you, or so many different types of things you could do. And when that happens, you start shifting off your focus. You're like, oh, I want to grab for that. That's an opportunity. Or I want to grab for that. And that's an opportunity. Instead, if you have a business plan and you're putting together, like, these are my 3 to 5 top goals for the year, I must achieve these in order to hit the goals that I have for the year. If I go get distracted by the squirrel, what am I going to let go of in order to achieve that? Is it more important than what I have on my list? Then I will change. If not, that goes into consideration for next year. And it's having that discipline that's so important so that you don't get off kilter personally when you're in your daily work life.
So let me ask you, because again, it sounds cliche, but can people really do what they love?
Absolutely. But they have to, like you said, they have to make the effort. So mostly, a lot of times when I'm consulting with people or coaching them, people have so many excuses of why they can't do something or why it won't work. And if you think about I think it's just been nice because my son's 20 and he's in the beginning, he's in college right now. He's doing environmental engineering. His eyes are wide open of the impact he can make on the world. He's just so excited. And so he had his first co-op job this year, and it was not what he thought the job would be when he was, in this field. So he's just coming home and I'm like, knowing what you don't want to do is just as important as what you do want to do, but it starts shifting you. But if you think about yourself as that 20-year-old with your eyes wide open, and how many times you got beaten down along the way of saying, no, that won't work, or that won't work, or that won't work. And then you start becoming that voice in your own head of, it's not possible. Anything's possible if you put a plan in place, if you've got, your exit strategies as well for protection and safety, but you have to want to put the effort into it. It's not going to just happen. If like you said, I could just be lazy if no one made me do it. That's why a plan's important and deadlines and everything else, because then you're like, oh, but I'm not going to not achieving my deadline or not achieving what I set out to do. So it'll motivate me. And I want to wake up every morning motivated to do the things that I love. So I need to fulfill this plan, but it doesn't happen out of thin air. I mean, being using the speaking as an example, I mean, I've been a speaker or a trainer since I was in college. I was a teaching assistant. I was an adjunct professor. Like you said, I did tons of free speaking over the years to learn how to speak. I did speaker trainings. It wasn't until I've been in my 40s that I took the leap to be a professional speaker and a keynote speaker, which is even harder. And it's a whole nother business I had to learn. But I went back to what do I love the most about what I do? And I want to be on stage. I want to get to more accountants and financial professionals and get the message across. But I know what my personal purpose is. It still has not changed. My personal purpose is to help entrepreneurs succeed, right? I never want an entrepreneur to go out of business or not be able to do the things that help their customers and so forth. So over time, what I saw with speaking was one accountant represented maybe 100 entrepreneurs. So I started seeing my personal purpose expand. I didn't have to go one at a time, that every time I helped an accountant, I was helping more entrepreneurs. And now that's grown even more as yoga came into my life and having a yoga studio, that I could build in health and wellness and mindfulness practices into business so people felt better and had thriving businesses so that they could still help their customers and clients that walk in the door. So although my pivots have happened, my personal purpose never changed.
Right. And, you mentioned something about entrepreneurs and the fact that, they get so many opportunities and you can get, your best laid plan can end up getting, waylaid by you're jumping at whatever the opportunities are. What's so interesting to me is a lot of folks who we talk about this, they don't see any opportunities. They don't know where the opportunities are. And I'm always like, really? Because there's so much stuff I want to do, I just can't get to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, and what I account for it is mind shift.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting is, when you shift your perspective, all of a sudden you begin to, I wouldn't say attract opportunities, you begin to see them for what they are, what you didn't see before. But if you're listening to this and you're an accountant, when I say the opportunities are endless, like, of course I do representation work, but there's forensic accounting, the automated bookkeeping, there's outsourced tax. I mean, can you become just a salesperson if you think about dealing with your clients and outsource the preparation of returns, the preparation of the books? You have certified financial planning. Accountants happen to make really good financial planners if you want to go that way. So and that's within sort of the solo accounting world. I think opportunity is everywhere. It's really, I think, much more of a mind shift than anything else.
Well, and it's also what you decide to make an investment in. So if you're not good at selling, pay a salesperson. Like, people don't want to make the investment in the other people that they need. Like, I probably am on, the more risk-taking piece where I hire people to do the things that, I need to get done in the business so that I can focus on the things that make us successful,
Right.
and I stay in a creative space and so forth. If I get to the point where I'm doing work that isn't going to help someone else could do that work, then the problem is I can't keep pushing the business forward.
Right.
And so as a business owner or a leader in an accounting practice, it doesn't matter who you are, delegating is really, really important, and being really honest about what you're not good at and hiring the people that are good at those things, right? So that you're maximizing those things that are not your strengths with somebody that it is their strengths, and you can keep focusing on the things that are your strengths. But you have to be willing to invest money, and that's the hard part.
Well, and with accountants, no offense to the accountants listening to this, I do find that is a hang up, because what they don't view as, like, for me, I have a personal assistant, right? Nicole, if she gets the phone call, she gets the paperwork out, whatever. That frees me up to go do what I'm going to do. So whatever she costs, I get multiple return on that.
Yeah.
What I find, though, is a lot of, especially accountants, only see the cost.
Mm-hmm.
They don't see the upside.
Yeah. Or look for an opportunity. They need a definitive answer on how much money they're going to make. And a lot of times you don't know. You can set the goal, like you said, I want this many clients or this much revenue, but there's no 100% accuracy on that.
Yeah. In fact, I don't know if you noticed, but for tax rep, I've often told people, add 100,000 to your bottom line. The reason is, I think you could be falling over drunk and add 100,000 to your bottom line. I mean, the average offer fee is about $7,500. You need 12 people. There are 30 million in trouble. Yeah. You can't find 12. And so, and I would suggest, people listening, there's a famous story about Henry Ford. When the Model T had taken off and he was now like on top of the world, these journalists came up with these hyper technical questions, and 5 of them went to his office and they wanted to question him. He said, okay, come on in. What are your questions? And he wrote down all 5 questions. Then he sent his assistant to go get the 5 people that could answer the questions, brought them in, and had his vice presidents answer the questions. And one of them finally said, well, why don't you answer the questions? He's like, I have them for that. That's their job.
Right.
And they said, what's your job? He said, my job is to think. And they said, that's all? And he said, it's the hardest job there is. That's why so few people do it.
Yeah.
And that is that I think you nailed it. I think a lot of entrepreneurs feel they have to do everything.
Yeah.
And one is you are stymieing the growth of your enterprise, whatever that is. And it does force you, and maybe even holds people up from making the change because, well, I can't do that. Like you said, hire. I got to tell people. So I was an accountant. I went to law school. I'm a tax attorney. I look at returns all the time. I look at bookkeeping all the time. I don't do bookkeeping. I don't do tax returns. I don't even do my own return. Right? We're a group of tax lawyers. We have an outside CPA firm that does our returns.
Right.
I have a controller. It's not what I do. It's not what I'm good at. I'm good enough at it. But to be honest with you, we get lots of financials. Our controller, Susan bills. She gets involved in the case if I need that kind of expertise. It's not my thing. The criminal defense lawyers that we have here, former DOJ lawyers, they bring in forensic accountants. Could they do it? I guess, but it's not their thing.
Right.
So no, I think you're absolutely I think you're absolutely spot on. And I know time is getting short. So before I let you run away and do what you need to do to, for your enterprise, for those folks who balk at the idea that, hey, I can do what I love and make money, that's sort of a pipe dream. Sort of just final thought on what your message would be to them.
Well, I think, like I said, is stepping back and observe what do you really want. I mean, there's a meditation where you use the mantra and you just repeat it in your mind. What do I want? Over and over. You just sit silent and just see what comes up for you. And if nothing comes up for you, sit back down the next day and do it again. That, there might be things, just like I talked about my son, things you don't want. So like I told you, I have this 5-day challenge coming up because one of the things that I find when I talk to accountants is what they don't want is some of their clients.
Really?
They complain about the clients that they're working with, and then we spend time and go, well, why are you not focused on getting the clients you want? So I have a 5-day challenge of love my clients, of how we are going to get the clients you want to work with and part ways with the ones you don't. So, so that is a 5-day challenge just to kind of get you started on this journey of really stepping back and looking at your business like a client. Like, you don't work in your business every day. You need to work on your business and dedicate time on your calendar each day. So that's, a thing to get started as part of, I do a business planning program to help people set this foundation and really make sure that they're building a practice that is purposeful as well, and that will align with their personal purpose, create the value that they want to create in the world, and make sure they're really intentional with how they're running their business every day.
And by the way, everyone who's listening, I will put a link to the 5-day Amy's 5-day challenge in the description below. I will also put a link out there to, even though it's very simple, amyvetter.com. You have all of your stuff. I think it's amyvetter.com, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
You can, Amy's TED.
Not 2 Ds.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I'll put the link in. But Amy's TED Talk is there. The B3 method, the Institute is there. I mean, you have tremendous content. I would highly recommend people go and dive in. My final message on this topic, being it's our 100th episode, and we're talking about, how to do what you love. Mine would be, look, if you're listening to this, you can make whatever change you want. Once you identify what you want, lay out the steps to get there and commit to paying the price to work and get that, anything is possible. So if you think otherwise, no offense, it's bullshit. It's the bullshit story you keep telling yourself. No, people taught me. Don't get me wrong. I could never replace Kobe Bryant.
Yeah.
There are certain physical skills I don't have. All right. But I will leave you with another quote from Henry Ford. If whether you think you can or whether you think you can, you're right. All right. It is a mindset. All right. So if you're really hung up about it, go to Amy, do the 5-day challenge, begin to realize that you can make this change, and then just get after it. Find the time, carve out the time, and just get after it. All right. And you'll get there. In fact, you'll probably surprise yourself. You'll end up way past where the original line that you drew for yourself. So with that, Amy, listen, thank you again for doing this. Now that COVID is gone, I'll see you again on the circuit.
Yes.
I assume. And everyone, listen, thank you for listening in. As always, thank you for all of listening to all the episodes. I can't believe we're at 100. And I will talk to all of you next week. Amy, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye. If you haven't already subscribed to the Tax Rep Network podcast, go to taxrepllc.com, mouse over resources, and click TRN podcast. You'll get an account loaded with all the episodes, our sponsor offers, and transcripts of recent podcast episodes. Thanks for listening, and thanks again to our sponsors, Call ENQ and Tax Help Software. See you on the next episode.